I got a question where we're trying to basically figure out how to properly structure a drop, right? And I think that this is a pretty good example because it's very EDM. And okay, so this is obviously 4 bars long, right? So we have this 4-bar section here and another 4-bar section here. So that makes a total of 8 bars, right? So typically in an EDM track, there's going to be one groove for pretty much the first half of the song, which would be 16 bars, or the first half of the drop, which would be 16 bars, right? And then the second half would be a second groove. But in this, I kind of did this a little bit differently. I have one groove here for pretty much 8 bars, and I switch it up. So another thing to note about, I guess, just structuring in general is the transitioning from one section into another. So we have, let's see. Yeah. So the transition point, I don't know why it's so laggy, but the transition point is really starting here, but really on the snare. So it's kind of like a half of a bar long to transit. The purpose of this is just purely to get into the next section without it being awkward. So I kind of do that throughout the song, at least for this first half. Yeah. Like right here, right after the snare, it transitions again into the next part. And it kind of starts with the lead here, which is kind of like another call and response thing, I guess. But it's a lead right here, a lead right there. So the lead kind of serves the purpose of helping guide the track into this transition point, which then guides it into the next section, which is kind of just a copy and paste, not really, but the same kind of groove going on in the first half. And then we transition again into the second half, which now this is 8 bars long. So now at this point, change the entire groove up. So it goes from like this groove to something completely different. So then we continue that for exactly this long before we transition again. You can kind of see how there's less stuff right here. And that's going to be like this half of a bar right here is a transition point. Yeah. Kind of is like kind of just right there. And then it goes into the next part, which is a copy kind of this part. So it's just a slight variation on that part. And then we go into a more clear transition. So this is the end of the first half, right? Which at this point, we're going to transition into something else. Right? But back here, so this section right here kind of serves the purpose of transitioning into that. So there's only really 2 bars in this particular half that aren't a transition point. And then this transition point, it kind of starts on the snare, not really the kick, but it's really 2 bars. That's a very common thing. That's a pretty common thing in EDM where they transition it takes 2 bars for it to transition to the next section. And then I think we do that again here. Yeah, this is much more clear. That's like literally an entire transition and it's 2 bars long. So that's very much clear what I think the point is. Like you take those 2 bars and it kind of leads into it. But the bar right before that is kind of guiding that transition. Like with the lead here, it's kind of just adding a little bit of energy, and then we put that into the transition, I guess. kind of go do the same thing on the second drop. Transition. Two bars long. Just like that part right there. And there you go. Exactly 2 bars long. Then that leads into the next half. So it's really pretty straightforward, I think, how this track in particular is structured. And I think a lot of tracks follow this kind of path, I guess, where it's kind of looping, and then you have like one main idea for this section, 8 bars long. And then that main idea is you transition here, right about here, into another main idea for another 8 bars. And then that would be the first half of your drop, which really, this second part is kind of like a continuation of this part. It shouldn't be like an entirely new, at least in my opinion, entirely new thing, because that kind of gets confusing if you introduce too many ideas along the path. But then the second half is where you can kind of do a little bit more fun stuff. But in this track, I kind of did it kind of as like a sandwich. Like this part is kind of more similar to the end right here, and then this middle part is kind of more similar to this part, I guess. Yeah, maybe not. I guess ideally I would have kind of continued this as one section and then another section right here, but I thought it was getting kind of repetitive, so I guess I had to change everything up at this part right here. But again, you have this transition that leads into it. Oops. Precisely 2 bars prior. Yeah, exactly 2 bars prior right here is where we lead into that, and then it's kind of pretty straightforward in terms of that. So I think a lot of EDM songs are structured this way, and it's very intuitive, I think. The same could be said for the intro. This is exactly 32 bars as well, and the 33rd bar is where the drop starts. I kind of broke this down a little bit differently, so I don't want to confuse things because we're talking about the drop here. So that's kind of what I did, though, and yeah, that's it.